If you're unfamiliar with how to pressure test your cooling system, it's fairly easy. So you buy a kit, and within that kit you have many adapters, and the adapters go onto the top of the radiator, so essentially replacing your radiator cap. Which means that you only want to do this when the engine is absolutely cold and no longer pressurized, because we do know the hazards of opening this up when it's hot. You have the possibility of being burnt. But what this is it is a cap with a gasket at the bottom of it that allows some pressure to be introduced to the cooling system without allowing backflow to occur. So it is a pressurized valve right here. And this is the relief for that valve. What happens is you pull back on this and then you introduce air into the system. And the idea is that this will allow you to find where the weak points are within your cooling system. And why is that important? Because it's easier to diagnose a situation when the car is completely cold to prevent injury to yourself, as well as prevent some issues with working on a warm car. What we're trying to do here is diagnose what is going on with our cooling system. During the National Acura Legend meet, we didn't experience any overheating or any weird symptoms that would suggest that there is a severe problem occurring, but we did find that there was occasions on really warm days and long travel where coolant would flow over into the reservoir and would not come back into the cooling system. So it would basically dump over as the volume temperature rose. So as heating occurred within the cooling system, the fluid would overflow naturally, which is supposed to occur. But when it cools down, it's supposed to draw that back into the cooling system to make sure that your radiator and the passages are always full of coolant. Now, what we noticed was that our line would go up, but it would never go down, which suggests that there is a leak somewhere within the system where air is able to get introduced to the system, not allowing for the pressurization to occur, which would allow the pressure gradient to go back into the cooling system, but only function one way. This will allow you to pressurize the system, figure out where the weak points are within your cooling system. So possibly there's a hose that's not seated correctly, or perhaps you have a break in a line as lines age. Or in our case, what we think the problem is the radiator. These radiators are built with an aluminum core with a plastic cap on both sides, and then there's a gasket in between the plastic piece and the aluminum core that is basically crimped on. And I'll show you what I mean here. So right here, we have some crimping, and this is designed to hold the top part of the radiator against that gasket and then against the aluminum core. Now, what we found out through pressurization of the system was under extreme time duration, meaning greater than, say, 6-7 hours of pressurization, that this gasket was starting to fail. As I don't know if it'll show up on camera here, but there's wetness that's all within these little breaks here. And our pressure slowly decreased over a 12-hour period. So what we did was we did a series of 3, 6, and then 12 hours. At 3 and 6 time intervals, we didn't notice any leaking occurring. But at 12 hours, this gasket started to give up and coolant started to slowly creep out of this. And that means we need a new radiator. Now, with a new radiator, we'll probably do some other upgrades along the way. Like, well, why not just do a complete coolant system flush and do a Prestone cooling system clean out. So essentially you run this solution through like we did on the CL a couple years ago, and it cleans out all the gunk that may be built up there because there's residual mass within the cooling fluid, and as things age you get breakdown, and that then leads to like residues, etc. So what we'll do is we'll do a whole new system here. We'll do a new radiator, new hoses, new thermostat gasket. With that, we'll make sure that we're using quality parts. So the other thing, we went ahead and replaced this. This had a slight crack in the top of it. That's why you notice that there's two different colors here. We were able to source an OEM coolant reservoir cap here, just to make sure that we're eliminating any potential failure points within the cooling system. Additionally, we'll just go through and make sure that there's no hoses that are weeping. So as you look, there's coolant hoses everywhere. We have like IACV passages here where the coolant is going in and then coming out. We already replaced this line last year, but we'll go ahead and just follow the coolant lines everywhere that they follow, and then just make sure that we don't have any decaying or weak hoses, and then take care of those at the same time. So one of the things you want to do is clean out your coolant reservoir. As you know, the coolant goes in here and then gets sucked back in, and you definitely don't want any of that sucked back in. So it's also hard to read the coolant level when you've got all sorts of weird gunk in there, kind of adding shade to where the level is. So we're going to clean this out with some brake cleaner, probably some Simple Green series, and then just flush it out with the garden hose, and hopefully we can get this back to some sort of resemblance of opaque. Okay, so we got the reservoir all cleaned up. It's a little bit harder of a task than I thought. It's not very easy to get anything in there to clean it out. I was able to use a pipe cleaner and bend it around enough, and then use a combination of brake clean on the inside to break up some of the gunk in there. But looks pretty good, and it should serve its purpose now, being able to accurately see the coolant. So we'll slide that back in there. There we are. And then we've got our new cap here. This recently broke on our trip to Nam this year, so had to get a new one. And then we'll get that all straightened up. We've got the coolant cleaning solution in there with some water. We're going to run it and then take it on a quick drive. Just bring it up to heat. Turn on the heat on the inside, and probably drive with the windows down and put a couple miles on it. All right, guys, so working on the Acura Legend. Right now we're draining out the coolant. That's what that noise is if you're picking that up. Essentially what we're trying to do is take the old coolant out. We're going to run our Prestone cooling system cleaner with some water through the system, the cooling system, as well as the heating core. That way we flush out any buildup, any junk, whatever it may be. It's been, probably 30 years or so since this car has had a cooling system flush. We know that there's likely something going on with the thermostat. We're seeing some odd temperature, and we know that this radiator has failed through our pressure test that we did, and it's failed right at the point where it crimps the top to the bottom. So the gasket in between the layers has failed, and this radiator is going to get replaced with a Denso radiator. This is a Koyo radiator. This was replaced by a dealership probably like 20 years ago. So it's just heat cycled out essentially. And now we're going to do that cleaning and put a new radiator in. So this is just preparation. What we do is we put the cleaning agent in with the water, run the car for about 15-20 minutes with the heat full on. So I usually do it when it's a cooler day like today. And then we'll flush all the old stuff out, and then put in the new radiator, put in new hosing and all of that, so that we have a nice new cooling system. Typically you would do the water pump. We're not going to do the water pump because, like I mentioned, I think in a previous video, this is the OEM water pump, and we're going to run that until it dies. And if it does die, then so what? We'll get a new water pump in there, and we'll just change out the coolant at that time. Not the world's biggest deal. So that's where we're at right now. I wanted to give you an update. Okay, so we've got the Acura Legend all refilled with the coolant solution, the cleaner solution that is, and then we've got the heat cranked up, and we're sitting here idling at about 1500 RPM, so we're going to go for a drive. Okay, so we got the car back from its approximately 10-minute run to cycle the cleaner through all of the passages. We're draining out the cleaner solution and flushing it out right now with the garden hose to make sure that there's no further contaminants. We have our distilled water right here. We're going to go ahead and flush out as much as we can into a pan down below, then reconnect everything, and then top it off with distilled water. We'll run that for a series of about 10-15 minutes, heat cycle it, and really just get all of that bad solution out of there and whatever remaining cleaning agent that's still there, and then we'll be good to go ahead and replace everything, radiator, hoses, etc. Okay, so we just put the distilled water through the cooling system, and now we're going to repeat the process of having the heat fully on, and we're going to do a 10-minute drive cycle thereabouts. That way we really mix up that water in the cleaner solution, and then we can drain it out, and then we'll be ready to go ahead and disassemble all the cooling system so that we can do a radiator replacement, a thermostat replacement, as well as all the gaskets and corresponding hoses. So that's how we go about cleaning our cooling system on the cars that we maintain, like the Acura CL and the Acura Legend, as well as the Acura RDX and the Honda Ridgeline. Okay, so we're at the point where we've got the new radiator placed in, and we've carried over some of the bits and pieces. You'll need to carry over the sensor that's on the bottom right-hand corner of this, and then all the bolts that work for attaching the fan to the radiator, that you'll need to carry over as well. But pretty much everything else is just plug and play. You can slide this out without taking the radiator fans off, as you saw, but it's a little bit difficult to do so, so keep that in mind. And then basically everything's about just fitting everything back in the way you took it out. Alright, so that's how you get the radiator fan back on. You need to line up your holes or your taps with the bottom of the radiator, and then we can start working on reattaching some of the other components like the coolant lines for the transmission, and we should be good to go. After that, we'll have to clean up some bits and pieces, but otherwise it's looking pretty good as far as everything going back together. We'll do some cleanup, some general maintenance while we're in here, and we'll be off to the races. Okay, so we've got the radiator put back in, and we've got all the hoses attached down below, which is 2 transmission lines, the lower radiator hose, and we're ready to put back in the thermostat here. Quick tip, you want to put the little hole here and align your gasket with that hole at the top so that any air that's in the system will have a route to escape. That's what that hole is designed for. Then we put the housing on. Just make sure you have a clean surface, and the housing goes on just like this. And you're just going to put your bolts in. There's only 2 on the outside here, and those 2 bolts are 9 foot-pound torque. And so we'll just line this up real quick. Okay. So then we'll get our torque wrench, we'll torque that to 9 foot-pounds like I said, and then we'll reconnect the upper and lower radiator hoses, and then we'll be good to go. Everything will come back together, and then we'll top off the coolant here and start to bleed the coolant. Now there's 2 ways you can bleed the coolant. You can use a Lyle funnel, or you can use the barb right there. That barb will allow you to expel any air out. So that's pretty much it. That's how you do a radiator change and a thermostat change on a 91 to 95 Acura Legend. So leave a comment down below, and otherwise we'll see you on the next one.